All right. Hi there. My name is Aaron Mullally, and I teach at Rasmussen College in Minnesota. And I'm here today to talk to you folks about something called flipping your classroom and the importance of implementing technology and media into your lessons, either as a supplement to your lesson or, again, for flipping the classroom. Um, Now, kind of the theme that the theme or the idea behind this lecture is to get is to get you educators out there thinking about better ways to make connections with your students, to create a more active, student-centered learning environment with the overall goal of, enhancing and exceeding learning outcomes for your students. Now, what you see here on this particular slide, um, is a video that I made probably when was that? 2000, all the way back in 2009. So a little over 3 years ago now, or right around 3 years ago. And what I started getting into this because I had a professor in college by the name of Doc C, who at Saint Scholastica, who was no, I shouldn't say was, he still is a brilliant lecturer, and he would always record his just audio versions of his lectures, and he would put them on iTunes and his website, and basically he just created podcasts. And I just listening to him re-explain things while at home studying, or if I was sick and missed a class, Doc C was always connected with not just me but all of his students. And that was a big influence on me, now that I teach, and I want to provide something like that for my students as well. But I wanted to make more videos than just podcasts because I know that we are more visual learners as humans. The sense we rely on the most is vision, and in terms of association areas with our cortex, we just use vision a lot. So that's why I wanted to use vision the most, because we are just primarily visual creatures. So you can see here that I just started taking I would just prop up a video camera and start talking in front of it. And then I learned how to use a smartboard and use the applications and technology with that to create, I think, honestly, better videos from there. And then which is kind of cool because times are changing, not just in education, but just in our lives in general. I mean, when I was a student, I recall, phones with cords. I remember growing up as a kid having to actually walk up to the TV and turn a dial, or push a button to actually make the channel go up and down. Music was on cassettes. I remember the first time I ever saw a CD, I thought it was cool. And then as a student, I would always come home and I would ask my parents for help on my actual homework, because you would spend, class time lecturing or doing a little bit of activity, but you would spend the bulk of class time going over the knowledge piece of education, and then you would do your homework and bring it in. Your teacher would grade it, and then you would take a test and just move on. Um, but now times are changing, and are basically times are changing with because in part because of technology. We're becoming a lot more advanced. Now, with the World Wide Web just infused into our lives. Phones don't have cords anymore. You can check your email on a smartphone. Heck, you can change your channel with your phone now. um, everything is practically remote, including access to information. And there are cool things out there like iTunes and other music features where teachers or people in general could just record podcasts and put them on there for people and students to download. There's things like YouTube for to watch videos where I put my videos that I create. And and also, with this constant access to the World Wide Web, with our students just constantly being more plugged in, they're more plugged into information, and they spend a lot of time relying on search engines like Google, like Bing, Yahoo. I'm going to assume Google is probably the most widely used, and then they also tend to use Wikipedia a lot as well, which isn't a terrible thing. It's good that our students are being proactive, and they're being proactive, they're looking for help, and that they just have access to all this information. But there is a drawback to that as well, is that there's a lot of bad information out there. There are times when Wikipedia doesn't quite get things right. It's not a bad site, but Wikipedia is wrong about things. There are plenty of bad websites out there with misinformation on them. And that's why I think it's important that us as educators get ourselves out there more on the World Wide Web, and whether it's just videos or full-on lessons for our students to have access to, whether it's our students or other students, because now we're creating an environment that with information that we can trust, because I mean we better trust the information we're putting out there ourselves. I feel better at night, when I'm sleeping at night, knowing that my students, if they're watching one of my YouTube videos or looking at a lesson I created on a website called Sophia, which I'll talk about in a second, I'm more comfortable because they're looking at information that I can trust, plain and simple. All right. And when I create my media, little technical hiccup here, one second. When I create my media, basically what I do is I post it in different places. One of the areas that basically where I started this was Facebook. I created a Facebook page just for teaching, and the page is called Aaron at Rasmussen at the word at, not the symbol. And what I would do is I would type up lecture notes. I would, I would put URLs to different websites. I would upload videos on there. I could use the status updates as an announcement section. There was a lot I could do with Facebook as a teaching tool. That, and it was just another way for students to just stay in contact with me. I mean, I always made it an option. I never forced any students to friend me on there, but it was a way for me to just to be connected with my students and provide them with educational material. And if something happened, there was a way for them, they would oftentimes send me a message through the school email and through Facebook as well, just to ensure that I got the message, and still to this day, which is really cool. The problem with Facebook is there are some limitations to it. I mean, one, if we're talking K-12 education, there's a lot of blocks on Facebook, and I don't think that's a terrible thing. There's a lot of students who are messing around on Facebook throughout the day, not spending time getting work done. When it comes to putting information on Facebook, it was great that I was able to put, notes and URLs and all that, and videos on there, but it was just scattered all over the place. You'd have to move around all these different places in Facebook just to try to get to a video and then read some notes on the same topic and then go to a URL. It was just the information was very scattered on there. So that was definitely one of the problems with Facebook. And another problem was if I wanted to upload a video on there, it could only be, I think, a maximum of 15 minutes. And I teach anatomy and physiology. That's the main course that I teach. And let me tell you, you need more than 15 minutes to explain most things in A&P. So that was kind of a drawback with Facebook. Well, then I started using YouTube, especially when I started teaching online, because I just wanted to figure out a way to because online is just a different beast, there, because you're having students in a digital world and you're trying to teach them from the four walls of your home, your office, or whatnot. And basically I wanted to figure out a way to take the digital world and the four walls of a classroom and merge the two together. And that's when I started really making more in-depth lecture videos, and that was at about the same time I started using the smartboard as well. So what I would do is I would record lecture videos, upload them on YouTube, and then I could take those videos and just paste them right into the announcement section of the online class. So they would log on and boom, there's the video right there. All right. And then and this was also benefiting and still is benefiting my residential students because, well, I've got a channel full of lecture videos. They can go watch them. So it's YouTube has been very helpful for me. Excuse me. And one of the nice, so YouTube has been very helpful for me with that, and I could put, hour-long videos on there if I have to. So if I get rolling on a topic, and so they can get a full class's worth of a lecture out of one of my videos. Just one of the only real drawback I have with YouTube is that you're really kind of subjected to uploading videos. You can organize them in the playlist, which is cool, but you can't really add worksheets or PowerPoints, along with the videos, or you can't. Um, you just can't. You're subjected to the video and basically describing, having a caption about what the video is about. Then they have to watch it, and then that's when I heard about Sophia about, oh, I don't know, 8 months ago, And Sophia.org is a site that, and what was cool about this is that I was basically taking everything I was doing with Facebook and YouTube and rolling it all together. And so basically, the way Sophia works is that you have these items on there called learning packets, and a learning packet is basically just a lesson. And what you would do is I can put with a specific lesson, I could put learning objectives, I could type in notes, I can upload a video into there. um, I could upload PowerPoint slides, I could upload worksheets, and I could put that all under one lesson. All right, I could put that all under one lesson, which was really cool. And and then I can make multiple lessons and organize them. So basically, like I said, with Sophia, I was taking everything I was doing with Facebook and YouTube and threw it all together in a much more organized fashion. I still use all three today, but I mainly use Facebook now as just a more of just an overglorified announcement page and just another way for students to email me if they miss class. YouTube, I'm still very active on, making videos and whatnot. But when it comes to a teaching tool, Sophia is probably the most useful for me just because I can do more with it. And the other nice thing about Sophia is it doesn't cost anything. It's a free service out there on the World Wide Web. Um, and so when I get to a lesson, a flipped lesson, where I make the students do the lecture outside of class and I have them do activity inside the class, I always make it, I always tell them, look, it's up to you just to get through this. The most important part of the lesson is the lecture and the media. And I always tell them, I said, look, you've got YouTube, and Sophia to work with as long as you get through this. And I'd say 90 to 95% of my students use Sophia just because, like I said, there's more that you can do with it as compared to YouTube. I mean, YouTube's not bad, Facebook isn't bad. It's just that for me personally, Sophia works the best. And my students have, just kind of naturally flocked to it, and they like it as well. So so that's where my media that's where I put my media when I make videos. And now let's talk about flipping the classroom itself. So basically a traditional classroom used to be where you'd have a giver of knowledge in the front of the class, the teacher, professor, and you would spend the bulk of the class lecturing. And they would lecture, they would tell stories, a lot of times it was a very student-centered Socratic lecture where where they would ask a lot of questions, get the class engaged in the talk, but you would spend most of the time doing the knowledge piece in the classroom, and then you would go home and again do homework, which was obviously an assessment of your knowledge, and then bring it in. Your teacher would grade it, and then you would take a test and just move on. Um, which isn't terrible, but that kind of neglected the application of the knowledge. How do you really put that to use? And that's kind of what and that's why flipping the classroom is becoming progressively more and more popular, is because it's called flipping the classroom because you're doing the exact opposite. You make the students do the lecture or the knowledge piece on their own outside of the classroom, and then when they come back to class, you create an environment that allows students to be more active and actually apply the knowledge that they from the lesson they did outside the class, because you would have some kind of activity set up, like with me, for example, with my classes, I would have lab work set up. I would have microscope slides or organs they have to dissect or models they would have to look at, and they would have to come in, look at them, and identify the parts on there. And then you could write quizzes. You could create, if you're a math teacher, create problems that are real life scenarios that they actually have to get together in groups and figure out. And then you, as the teacher, the educator, would go around to these students while they're working through these problems and basically see how they're doing. So you become much more of a facilitator and kind of a moderator as well of the application of the knowledge. So that's basically what flipping the classroom is. Um, and here's a couple examples of these next two slides are going to be examples of lessons that I flip. um, for starters, when in A&P 1, Anatomy and Physiology 1, in about week 2, we go through the topic of histology, the study of tissues. And that's a very foundational subject because pretty much everything they're going to do for the rest of the class, there's histology incorporated into it. And then they're also going to have to learn, pathophysiology and pathology, more pathophysiology, which is the mechanics of disease. And a lot of that is, well, what goes wrong at the tissue level. And my class meets twice a week, and the first day of histology would be spent talking about just lecturing about histology. So let's say this is a Monday Wednesday class, so Monday would be lecture, Wednesday would be the lab. And then typically in a traditional anatomy and physiology classroom, the integumentary system or skin would follow afterwards. And basically, the bulk of that is just applied histology anyway. And now, skin is a topic that realistically you need an hour. If you 50 minutes to an hour, and you can give students all the knowledge they need to know about skin to move into what they need to do. So what I did was is I created about a 50 hair over a 50-minute lecture video, and I uploaded it to YouTube and Sophia. And this is an example of a Sophia lesson here. So what I tell my students is I say, look, so let's say we start histology on Monday. I can spend more time in class lecturing on histology and the real importance of it. And then I tell my students, okay, look, by Wednesday's lab, you have to have gone through this video, which you see on the right here, which is right in that lesson on Sophia there that I created. And then you can see these learning objectives here. These I hand out a huge packet of learning objectives for my students on the very first day of class, and there for A&P1 there's about 350 very specific objectives. All right. And this video basically covers about, I think, 15 to 17 of those objectives. All right. So they've got those objectives right there. So basically by the time they're done with this video, this is, those objectives are saying this is what you should get out of this lesson. This is what you need to know. And then when Wednesday's lab rolls around, well, then, they're going to come in already doing the histology lab, and then I can have some activities related to skin set up. Like, for example, I could have a pig and dissect out the layers of the skin. And then I could, have them identify the layers of the skin. I could have microscope slides set up to where they actually have to look at the skin under the slide and identify what they're actually seeing there. One thing that's really fun to do is take a black light and shine it over their hands to see how well they wash their hands. And then when half of their hands, light up like a Christmas tree under there, then they can see how, oh my gosh, they can see how important it is to wash their hands going in the healthcare field. And then, I'm sitting there talking to them as well, about, okay, well, why are your hands glowing up? What's on your skin that's making that happen? And then the very next week, I test them on tissue and skin together, and it works pretty well. I mean, I honestly haven't lectured about skin in class in almost a year now, and it's like I said, it's been very successful for me. Now, another another subject that I use the multimedia on is the skeletal system, the gross anatomy of bones. Now, this is a topic that if you honestly lecture about, it's a great way to put students in a comatose state. It's a very important subject. I mean, you have to know the anatomy of the bones and landmarks on bones. It's just an extremely dry topic. Here's a bone, here's some bumps and landmarks on it. Memorize these. This is just a rote memorization topic. And what I would do is I would spend time lecturing about these. We would have a lab and then move on. And now, and like I said, I spent half the time. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good lecturer in class, but even then, I would still just put people to sleep because it's just a dry topic to talk about. So now, what I do, by now that I've created videos about it, this has completely changed the way I teach this. So now, what I do is I combine the anatomy of muscles and bones together in a 2 week span. And on the first day of those 2 weeks, I spend maybe an hour tops just giving a general description of the skeletal system, the importance of knowing it, some basic important knowledge that they need to know about it. And then when they kind of start to get sleepy towards the end of the hour, then I say, okay, you guys are doing your thing from here. So what I have them do then is I have them look at, I just have them pull out bones and look at them. They've got their learning objectives. They know which bones and landmarks on the bones they need to be looking at. So then they get together in groups in the lab and they're just sitting there looking at bones. And then the very next class, they have to have watched videos before the next class, and then we just continue. And then while they're doing that, myself and my work study just walk around the classroom and just, let's say they've got a femur in front of them. I'll just walk up and say, I'll grab the femur and point to a part. Let's say I point at the head of the femur and say, what is that? If they don't say the head, then I'll correct them and explain why, and then kind of move on from there. So basically, my students just get some tips about the bones through these videos at home, and then they spend the bulk of time in classroom actually looking at them. If you're an anatomy teacher, and especially a good activity to do in a high school or a college setting, is to, if you have a disarticulated skeleton, have your students put it together. Have your students take all the bones and try to assemble them in the correct fashion. That's a good way. That's a good activity for them as well. Now, another thing about one thing I want to mention before I move on is if you look to your left here at these learning objectives, this is what not to do with learning objectives. I've since gone back and fixed this, but look at the bottom of the two. Know where the femur is in its major landmarks. Okay, if you're going to be cutting your students loose and having them do the lesson, the lecture, the knowledge piece on their own, it's very important that you give them specific guidance. All right. There's a lot of landmarks on all the bones in the body. All right. But students don't have to know every single one. All right. They don't have to know every single part of the femur. So instead, this objective should say, know where the femur is and identify the following landmarks: the head of the femur, the trochanter, greater lesser trochanter, the condyles, and etc. So make sure that when you write learning objectives that you are very specific with your objectives. All right, so I just wanted to mention that as well. Now, when you are lesson planning and preparing for a flip lesson, I like to think of doing this from a three-step approach. Basically, think about your learning objectives first, and then figure out your assessment slash group activity, and then actually create the lesson itself. And let's talk about this for a second. So your learning objectives, the importance of learning objectives. Learning objectives are a guideline not just for your students, but for yourself. By you as a teacher, by sitting down and actually putting your objectives out on writing, whether it's by hand or a computer, you're organizing your thoughts. You're organizing what you specifically believe that the student should know based on obviously certain standards that need to be met. I mean, I based my learning objectives for my class off of the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society's objectives because I'm a member of their society. But, their objectives are good, but they're kind of vague. All right, which they should be. They shouldn't be writing out, 700 learning objectives. So but by going off of but I looked at their guidelines, their learning objectives, and then I made even more specific ones based off of what they already had. All right, and so by having specific objectives, you're creating a specific guideline of linear learning. That's what I like to call it. You're allowing learning in a systematic linear fashion. All right, so you get your objectives figured out, which is which are saying when you're done with this lesson, this is what you should know, and then you go right to thinking about how you're going to assess those objectives, which is basically what is the activity you're going to be doing in class. All right. So basically you have to make sure that the activity you're going to be doing is going to be reflective of what those objectives are saying the student should get out of that particular lesson. All right, so make sure that you put a lot of emphasis on that assessment, that your group work is practical and related to the objectives that you came up with. And I think it's easy for teachers to focus very hard on the actual lecture part of it, which is the lesson, basically the delivery of the lesson itself, and then come up with more of a weak. And then when you do that, I think you tend to come up with more of a weaker assessment, because it's just the natural way of teaching. You think of you organize your thoughts, you think about what they need to know, and then you just deliver. And then you would write an exam and then test them on it. But like I said, think about your objectives first, how you're assessing the objectives, and then actually put the delivery of the lesson together. And I've noticed that just basically I think it makes you more effective at thinking and planning for a flip lesson. And then just make sure when you're actually implementing your lesson that you utilize a variety of resources, that you provide them with lecture notes, practice labeling images, maybe a take-home quiz, um, just whatever you can give them to help. And make sure that, like I said, do what you can to make your lesson as visual as possible. All right, make it as visual as possible. All right. If you can't do it, if you don't have a smart board, then there are other technological resources out there that are low cost or even free, which I'll talk about in a second. All right. But just like I said, make sure you provide your students with a wide variety of resources and make your presentation as visual as possible. All right. So let's talk about some of the technologies that are out there that you as a teacher can use to create your media. Like I said, if you look in the middle there, that's a smart board, and that's what I predominantly use today. With the smart board, there's an app called the software for a smart board is called Notebook, and then there's an application called Smart Recorder. And basically, what that does, that you're familiar with what a screenshot is. A screenshot is when you take a picture of what's on the screen. The Smart Recorder is basically it's a streamer. It records everything that's actually done on the screen. So so basically, if I'm, you can see the digital markers down there. I upload images and PowerPoint slides, and then I write on them, and everything is captured on there. And then I just plug in a headset with a microphone, and I just sit there and talk away. So basically, the I'm capturing the visual part of the presentation. I'm capturing what's being written on there, and then they can hear what I'm saying, the actual lecture along with all that. They just can't see me. They can see what I'm writing about, and they can hear me talk, but they can't see me. That's probably not a terrible thing anyway. But that, like I said, for me, that's what's been working the most. But I understand that, especially when you're looking at K-12 education, I mean, budgets are always a constant battle, and smart boards may not be a feasible option, due to budgetary constraints. So you can move over, to a video camera. All right, if you have access to a camcorder, which is a lot more cost effective, just do what I showed you earlier. Just put the thing on a tripod and just stand there and talk. If you're a science teacher, demonstrate lab activities. Put it in front of a chalkboard or a dry erase board and just stand there and lecture like you'd be lecturing to a classroom of people. Um, it's a really cool option. And then if you look in the lower right, there's this web application called Screener, and Screener is a free service, and basically it's a screen. It's kind of like the recorder application with the smartboard. It captures everything you're actually doing on the screen itself. If you go to you see how it says Screener right down there in that box on the top. You just go to Screener.com. You can kind of learn more about it. But you can put slides and visual, make a visual presentation, and then you could just use your mouse to doodle and draw with on there, and then again hook up a headset and talk. There's always Skype. Skype is a good way for you to create an online classroom or connect with students or individuals. Or online office hours as well. It's a great way for you to do office hours online. There's always iTunes. If you're only limited um, to just doing a voice lecture, then fine. Put it. Make a podcast off it. There's a lot of resources for you to, technological resources for you to create media for students to take home and use in a flip lesson as a flip lesson. Now, again, my videos go to YouTube and Sophia. And then bear in mind, there's also Facebook, and Vimeo is an option as well. Now, like I said, with YouTube, one of the problems you're going to run into, especially in K-12 education, is that there are just a lot of schools block YouTube. And again, that's not a terrible thing because, if you block YouTube, then students aren't going to be sitting around watching people emulate Jackass all day. They're going to, well, hopefully be focusing on their studies. But like I said, everybody knows about YouTube, so it is a resourceful teaching tool as well. So if your school has blocks on YouTube, well, Vimeo is a good option for that because Vimeo is just Vimeo is just not blocked. All right. And so you could upload videos to Vimeo and then, use that. You could upload videos directly to Sophia, and, I mean, there's no blocks on that either. So Sophia and Vimeo are good ways to get around, if your school district has actual blocks on Facebook and YouTube. And you have to bear in mind that all of these services are also free as well. They don't cost it, it doesn't cost you anything to actually put videos on YouTube, to make a lesson on Sophia, to use Facebook or Vimeo. If you want to use Vimeo does actually have a cost if you want to use the more enhanced version of it, but there is a free aspect of Vimeo as well, except you're just subjected to how much you can upload on a week by week basis. But Vimeo is a useful tool. All right. So again, just some tips to talk about flipping the classroom. Don't be afraid to experiment. Just about a week and a half ago, I was getting to in my Anatomy 2 class, I was getting to the urinary system, which the 90% of that subject is talking about kidneys. And I was sitting there thinking about this, and it was on a Wednesday, again, another Monday, Wednesday class. And I decided, you know what? I'm not going to lecture tonight. I already have 3 videos made that are going to cover what I would normally lecture about in class that night. So what I decided to do was, once my students got done with their test that day, I told them, I said, all right, here's what you're going to do. You have to watch these 3 videos. One was about 50 minutes long. The other 2 were about 45 minutes long. We meet for about 3.5 hours. That's how about long my classes are, because we only meet twice a week, and it's a heavy credit intensive course. Um, so I told them to, you go to the student, go to the student lounge, go to the library, go to the learning center, do whatever you have to. Heck, stay in the classroom if you have a laptop. You have to watch these videos by the end of class. And what I had them do is, when they got done with each individual video, they had to come back after each one, and I had a 5 to 7 question little quiz set up just to see what they retained out of the video. And it was kind of cool because, some of my students that were the top students in my class kind of flubbed one of the quizzes or a few questions, and some of the students that were kind of sitting at high C low B range did relatively well. They retained the information really quick out of those videos, so it's kind of neat just to see that. And then what I did was is I and is then on for the following Monday, I had a packet on Sophia that is all about just the gross anatomy of the kidneys. I have a lecture on there. They already actually watched the lecture on it, but I put the video in there anyway. There's PowerPoint slides on there. There's a worksheet with a bunch of kidney pictures that I created myself on there for them to practice labeling on, and then there's a little quiz at the end of it. And I told them, I said, okay, look, by Monday you have to have this done. You have to have gone through this packet so we could start the kidney lab. So it was really cool because then what I did was is I put all the parts on the board that I wanted them to identify, on the external and internal anatomy of the kidneys. The only instructions I gave them was how to just cut the kidney open. And it was really cool and then I actually, for the first 20 minutes of that lab, I also had to go proctor an exam because I had a student who had to miss class for the medical reasons, and the student had to make up the test. And so my work study got the lab running. You should have seen it. It was cool. I came back in the classroom, and everybody was just around their kidneys. They were identifying everything. My work study was going around, and my work study was asking them questions, and they were just answering them, identifying what the parts of the kidneys were, like that. I started walking up, and then, having them, asking the same question she was. All right. And I would tell them, okay, look, trace the flow of blood through the kidney you have in front of you. And they would just be able to tell me right where all the major vessels in the kidney would be. And I didn't lecture about any of that in class. It was really cool. So just that one little experiment, honestly, is going to change the way I teach that. Honestly, it's getting me thinking about how I'm going to approach more solid, gross anatomy topics like that as well. But I was willing to experiment, all right? And it was really neat to see how much they learned without even me lecturing at them in class. Now, you as an educator, you're the content expert, all right? And plus, we were students at one point in time as well. Anticipate students' questions. If we're going to be putting our students out there and on their own doing these lessons, it's up to us to do everything we can to eliminate as much confusion as possible, all right? Because there are some topics that just tend to be more confusing than others, all right? And it is up to you to make sure you eliminate that. Make sure your lesson is this, your lesson slash, meaning your video, the sheets, the notes, whatever you give them is going to eliminate as much confusion as possible. So when they come to class and you're ready to assess them with whatever activities you have planned out, you're just ready to go. You're ready to go. All right. And like I said before, plan your objectives well. Make sure they're specific. Make sure they're guiding, that they're solid, they're or granular. It's a common term I hear about objectives. Then make sure that they're going to be a good description of what a student should get out of that particular lesson. And like I said, just make sure you provide them with as much material as necessary. Make sure you're as visual as possible. For heaven's sakes, test your equipment when you're making a video. I can't emphasize enough the importance of that. You know, just today I recorded a lecture video on how the autonomic nervous system regulates heart rate. And if I would have started that, if I would have gone through and made that whole video, there would have been no sound on it because for some reason my headset and my microphone broke. So what I always do is I just, I plug in the headset, I turn the recorder on. I just spend 5 to 10 seconds just saying testing, testing, is this working? And then writing on the board at the same time. And then I save, and then I stop it, and I always save it, the video as, I just call it test. And then I always replay it and watch those 5 to 10 seconds to make sure that I can hear myself and I can see everything I'm writing on the board. All right. So, I mean, that would have been 40 minutes of lecturing time I would have lost. Then I would have had to do all over again. So make sure that you test your equipment before you use it. All right. And then don't feel rushed. Just be yourself. It's kind of weird getting yourself out there on the World Wide Web. It really is. And at first, I mean, you probably heard me say it a few times, saying, okay, stuff like that. But when I first started making videos, I said, I mean, after every 4 words I said, and it was really annoying. I mean, basically I sounded like I came straight out of the movie Fargo, and that just wasn't good because we don't talk like that up in the Northland, for the most part. But so make sure that you just be yourself. Inject your personality into your lesson, because that's just a good, I just said it right there. That's a good way for your students to stay more connected to you in a digital world when they're not actually in the classroom. So make sure you do that. Now let's quantify everything I've been talking about. Before doing this, I had about a 35% combined failing withdrawal rate. Whether we're talking K-12 or higher education, students are busy. When I was in high school, I worked 1 to 2 jobs at a time. I played sports year round. I was tired all the time when I would get home. I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was homework right away. I just want to take a little bit of time to just rest and relax. If we're talking higher education, a lot of students, you're seeing a lot of the quote unquote non-traditional students going back to school. These are students who don't go into college straight out of high school. These are students who have families, who have jobs, who have very real responsibilities that they need to juggle along with their education. So by providing students with their lessons to do outside of class, they're getting that lesson done when they can get it in. It's just up to them to actually get the lesson done before the next class. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating a blended class. You're turning a residential class into a blended class. And if a student ever fell but missed a class, it was so easy for them to fall behind because well, I would just get an email or a phone call saying, what did I miss? And I'd say, well, we went over this and this and chapter this or that covers those objectives. If you have any question, let me know. I mean, I can't just go back and re-lecture for every student that missed, but now I can because I have a lot of my lectures on video. Not all of them yet, but I have a lot of them on video. So it's kind of cool that I can do that. A cool little quick story about that is about half a year ago, I had a student who was sick, missed class all week. We were covering the autonomic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that regulates all the unconscious organ activity of your body. And this is a student that was normally hovering around a C plus to a B minus, just always kind of hovered right around that range. And like I said, the student was sick, let me know. So what I did real quick is I took those videos, I put them in Sophia, I put which learning objectives the videos covered, and the videos were in order, in sequential order as to how she should have watched them. And I, let the student know that said, okay, look, if you have any questions, just let me know, because, through email or you can ask me a question on the Sophia lesson or whatever it might be. So that student came back to class that following Monday without even being in class that whole week. That student got the highest grade on that test. Oh, the student only got one wrong on that test. That was awesome. Without any contact with me in the classroom, just with a couple of videos that I made that I was able to get to the student, he got an A. And then, from there on out, I could also see that that student learned a lot about that material because, that's a very core topic of the human body to understand. And lots of times, if we're, 5 weeks away from that, I would still ask, or I'm sorry, beyond that, I would still ask questions related to the autonomic nervous system. And that student answered a lot of them. I mean, that material clicked. It was really cool without even her being in there. All right, so in a nutshell, my lessons were only, my lessons and my were pretty much just isolated to the what you would get out of being in the four walls of my classroom. Well, now that I've got this whole digital world to work with, I now, in just about a year, my combined failing withdrawal rate dropped 20% to 15%. These are exact numbers. All right. Just because I'm more connected to my students. They have online tutorials to help them to study with. If they miss class, they can stay caught up because they've got these lectures now. And then I can spend more time in the classroom doing more hands-on activities. It's really neat. And then the cool thing about this as well is that I'm not only connected to my students, I'm connected to students on a global scale. I mean, every day I'm getting, new subscribers to my YouTube channel, and there are some people that just thought my videos were so helpful that they took an extra second to say thank you. And that to me, and that's the driving factor that keeps me doing this, that I'm helping not just my students, but many students. I'm one person that's a teacher of many. And that's why I'm doing this, giving you this talk, is because I want more teachers to be doing that as well. I mean, just last week, I was walking somewhere, and I got a notification on my because I have a smartphone, and I got a notification on my Gmail from a student from Denmark about a video that I made 2 days before that, saying thank you. I never understood this topic until I watched your video. I mean, how cool is that? That's just awesome. So I think it's like I said, I think it's important for us to get ourselves out there so we can help our students to create a better learning environment, and in the end, we can help other students as well. Um, Now, basically, if you want to kind of see examples of the work that I've been creating, my YouTube channel, that's the name of my YouTube channel, Bull Harrier. My Twitter account again is Aaron Mullally. I get asked once in a while, what are good resources for teachers who are really curious about this topic? If you go to Twitter, these two hashtags, oops, I should have put the pound sign by flipped class. Sorry about that. But these two hashtags here, flipped class and flip class, that's an area where there's just a lot of teachers who are doing a lot of blogging, discussing, just talking about flipping the classroom, and so there's a lot of good resources from other teachers. Because realistically, I mean, the best resources you have are teachers that are actually practicing this. So go check that. Check those two hashtags out on Twitter if you have any questions about this. And then an example of what my lessons on Sophia look like. This is the URL that will take you there. So I just want to say thanks for taking the time to watch this video. And again, my goal of this video was to get you educators out there thinking about ways to just be more connected to your students, to create a more active, student-centered, and honestly just fun learning environment, and still meet and exceed learning outcomes. So, and if you have any questions, you have all my contact information on this presentation. And, again, thanks for watching.